Welcome. Thank you for joining me in Dear Mr. Jefferson, Conversations with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Mr. Madison and I were honored to visit the students of WordWorks in Lynchburg, Virginia, while on our way to Poplar Forest, my retreat and plantation located but a few miles southeast of Lynchburg. Today, Poplar Forest is a National Historic Landmark, which you can visit and tour. Here, the children ask Mr. Madison and I about the Boston Massacre, and we discuss the power of words and what it means to be a good leader. You have a question.
Was you there in the Boston Massacre?
Was I there at the Boston Massacre, or was I in that? No, I was back in Virginia at that time. That was March of 1770, was it not?
I believe it was. And Mr. Adams was instrumental in that. Do you know Mr. Adams, the second president? Long before he was second president, he was a lawyer in Massachusetts. And Mr. Adams was very much an American patriot in Massachusetts. But during the Boston Massacre, do you know what the Boston Massacre was?
Yes.
The British soldiers fired into a crowd of people. And
some of the people in, I think, Great Britain or England started calling the British soldiers names and throwing rocks.
well, not the people in England, but the people in Massachusetts.
In Boston.
Were calling people, the soldiers in Boston, British soldiers in Boston, they were calling them names and throwing snowballs at them, and someone accidentally, apparently, one of the British soldiers fired his rifle accidentally, or someone heard the word fire, but the British troops fired into the crowd. Now, Mr. Adams, John Adams, was a patriot, and everybody looked to him to be a patriot. And a representative from the 8 British soldiers came to Mr. Adams, apparently, and asked Mr. Adams to defend them in court. Do you imagine a patriot in Massachusetts defending British soldiers when the seeds of revolution were being built there? But Mr. Adams accepted the case. And Mr. Adams accepted the case because if he could make sure that the court acquitted these men, made them found not guilty, then he could prove that Massachusetts justice was better than British justice. And that's why he accepted the case. It was a most daring thing. Many people criticized Mr. Adams muchly for having defended British soldiers who fired on a group of people. But you know what happened? The soldiers were found not guilty. Mr. Adams showed that it was the mob who was inciting this activity. And Mr. Adams convinced the court that these soldiers were not guilty. It was a most extraordinary measure on his part. I was not there, but I read about it. The committees I was actually in New Jersey at the time. Were you there? You weren't there.
Well, that was most fortunate you were not. I cannot help but think that Mr. Madison, having said something earlier, applies to this very subject. Remember, he said when you're younger, think about where you might be in the future, and then think about how you might conduct yourself at your present age so that something can be prevented that could happen in the future. What do you think might have been prevented if an angry mob might not have been shouting names and calling the soldiers names or using foul words? What do you think could have been prevented?
Nobody got hurt.
Exactly. The entire massacre could have been prevented. No one would have gotten angry or provoked and opened fire. So this is one of the reasons why, again, it is natural to be angry, but try to count to 10 when you get angry.
Also, I think it's important to note that the people in Massachusetts called it a massacre. The word massacre, like any word, can have very important implications in the way you use it. If there were 3 people shot and killed, it's not like a whole town was wiped out and killed. But if you call it a massacre, then that inflames people who hear about it. And they say, it was a massacre? That can't be right. That can't be good at all. The British soldiers were starting a massacre in Massachusetts. And you can see how the power of words can cause people to think differently about something when the word is really being misused. I learned a word when I was very young, and the word was called exiguous. Can you say exiguous? Exiguous. Exiguous means very tall or very slight. And not many people know the word exiguous. But if someone in your school comes up to you and tries to persuade you how smart they are, and do all kinds of things to show how much better and how much smarter they are than you can look at them and smile and say, I am overwhelmed by your exiguous intelligence, which means you don't think they have very much intelligence at all. And so the word exiguous is an unusual word, but it's a powerful word, because you can say what you think about the person without him getting offended.
Mr. Madison and I both write many, many letters. In fact, the Declaration of American Independence is a letter, a formal letter. But you know what we try to do whenever we write? We try to engage wordsmithing. Wordsmithing when you write. What does a blacksmith do?
Make tools.
Blacksmith makes tools, he hammers iron and the like. Well, what do you think wordsmithing means? Learning the right words, using the correct words when you write.
We try to make words work.
Right. Very good.
Shamil, do you have a question there? Have you asked all your questions?
Do you ever risk your life in the revolution?
Did I ever rescue a life in the revolution? No, I did not. Did you, Mr. Jefferson?
No, in fact, though, we were both colonels of militia, Mr. Madison, for less time than myself. I did not see any action in battle, so I was never able to rescue anyone on a field of battle. Remember, I was governor of Virginia, and I was a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, and I also served in Philadelphia as a delegate there. I was more or less, if you will, a leader. One of the ways someone can become a leader is when they rescue someone. It does not have to be in battle. It can be in everyday life. Someone may be in harm's way, someone may be beset upon, and then you have the opportunity to come to their rescue. And do you know why that helps you become known as a leader? Because what do you think everyone else will think about you when you seek to rescue someone? What will they think?
They will think that you're a hero.
Yes.
Good role model.
A good citizen, a good individual, a hero of all the people. They will place great trust and great faith in you as someone who can help rescue people from troubles. And that's very useful.
In 1780, Mr. Jefferson and I rescued each other because the British came into Charlottesville, where he was there, Governor Jefferson, and I was part of the legislature. And they came in, the British came into the town, and we got out of town very, very quickly. And so I rescued myself, and Governor Jefferson rescued himself.
We had to. Yes.
What made a good citizen?
What makes a good citizen? Do you know what makes a good citizen in my eyes? This moment. This very moment when all of you show what fine citizens you are by being extremely well-mannered, by being curious to ask questions, interested to ask questions, most importantly, thinking about the questions you ask, thinking about our answers. That makes a good citizen, particularly that you're involved, that you're right here in this moment, proving that you will be good voters. And who knows, that you will be elected to represent the people, good leaders as a result. To be a good citizen means that you will be a good leader.
What makes a good leader?
Person who has the nerve to ask the question, what makes a good leader?
That's very good.
That's a very good leader. You initiate something that no one else is initiating. You have ideas of what a group could do. And then you motivate other people, if you're right, motivate other people to think the same way. But when they don't, and they have a better idea, a good leader is one who will bend his own ideas and accept another idea if it seems to be better. It's a flexibility when you need to be flexible, and it's a sternness and a set purpose to give motivation and drive to a group of people who themselves are at sea about what they should do about something. Yes?
Do you think you were born a leader?
Do I think I was born a leader? Well, I was the first one born in a family of 12, so I guess I was the first one to lead the family to existence. But no, I don't think I was born to be a leader. It's something that I accepted along the way that I would have to do. To be a good citizen is to accept your responsibility to do your part in the community to make it work. And it seemed that I had a talent and a skill to deal with matters of government and politics. That was my skill. I was not a good general. I was not a good soldier. My skill was in politics and in government. So I contributed to the society with my particular skills.
Nakia, that is a very good question. I'm wondering, even if someone thought they were born to be a leader, who must be the ultimate judge of whether someone is a leader? That's right, the people.
Yes, Ashley.
Do you know more about George Washington than we do?
Oh, well, have you ever met him?
No, sir.
No. So as we have met him, maybe we do know perhaps a little more. Of course, they can always read about General Washington, but then it's a question of whether they are reading the facts rather than fiction.
We learn a lot about the world in which we live by our own experiences. But sometimes when things have happened in the past, we have to rely upon the accounts of other people. And this is where wisdom comes about. If we ask advice for someone who has lived so many years in this world, they can give us a wise estimate about how we should look at it. But sometimes if there's, my grandfather died before I was born. I only know about him by what people tell me, so I kept asking questions when I was a child. And sometimes, Mr. Washington, did you know his story about with a walnut? As he crushed a walnut with his thumb and his forefinger. Just this way. It's very difficult to crush a walnut anyway, but he did it with, that so shows how strong he was with his fingers. And there was one time when we were in the convention in Philadelphia when someone challenged Gouverneur Morris to go up to General Washington and tap him on the shoulder. Nobody was familiar with General Washington. You did not go up and tap him on the shoulder. And so someone wagered with Gouverneur Morris whether he would do it. And Gouverneur Morris, with his one leg was wooden, and he just hobbled up to Mr. Washington, tapped him on the side, on his shoulder. And Mr. Washington, General Washington turned around and looked at Gouverneur Morris with this stern, stern face saying, "Why would you ever be so familiar with me as to touch my shoulder?" And Mr. Morris kind of worked his way away from General Washington. He was almost ashamed of having done it. There are some people who carry such dignity that you just don't act that familiar with them. And that was one story about General Washington. I don't think maybe you knew before, did you?
And that, I can assure you, is fact.